evening. Today is August 14th, 2021. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
And I'm John Gatsis.
And you've just tuned in for an hour of America in Danger. And that it is.
It indeed is. There's no other
way you can put it.
Right.
There's no other way you can look at it. You know, if anyone has a IQ over 85, I think they realize that we are in dire straits right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, anybody, I've made this statement before, anybody over the age of 40 doesn't really even recognize this country, and it certainly doesn't recognize the behavior and the governing sensibilities of the people that we've elected to represent us. That's, I guess, the biggest sense that I have about what's going on. I mean, it's palpable, and it feels like we're in the middle of some kind of almost like an occupation.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. It is almost like we are occupied. We have people in Washington doing things that just really make no sense at all. We have government agencies that are disseminating propaganda, lies, misinformation.
A public school system that has become nothing but a full-on re-educate or indoctrination center for young people, analogous to Hitler Youth and Red Guard type of. I mean, frankly, I don't understand how people can leave their children in those schools, but
nor do I. I think it's because parents have been conditioned over the last few generations to believe that the schools and the teachers cared about children.
Right.
Which is standard fare for government and tyrannical propaganda. Yeah, they tell you they care about you, they want to feed you, they want to clothe you, they want to give you housing, they want to do all these things for you.
All these magnanimous things. Yeah, but there's a price.
There's absolutely a price, and if you look southward to Cuba, you see that price firsthand.
Well, I forget, it might have been Jefferson, I'm not sure which of the founding thinkers, I'll say, made this statement, I'm going to paraphrase, but those who seek security at the expense of liberty often gain neither. Or have neither, and I think that's very true. I mean, the little bit of security you get from what's promised to you by these increasingly socialistic programs and far-reaching authoritarian federal agencies and mechanisms and bureaucracies, they're not worth it. They're not even close to worth it. You may think they are in the short term. Well, I got that check and it kept me from having to, default on my payment here or whatever circumstance you feel like you were bailed out of. But ultimately, it's like selling your soul. And you really, people, I think they don't understand what their liberty is because they've never experienced not having it, not fundamentally not having it. And if you talk to people who come from other parts of the world or who've emigrated here from places like Cuba or even from former Soviet bloc countries or even from just places that are basically, what we often derisively characterize as third world rat holes, they will tell you, do not go down this road that you people are going down. I mean, you are making a huge mistake. And a lot of times it's glassy eyes and blank stares from people because they simply have no clue. They don't understand that liberty is not the default condition for humanity, either contemporaneously or historically.
I think that's absolutely true. And we have millions coming across the southern border. I think at this point this year we're well over 1.1 million.
I think they're estimating 2 million for the year. Okay.
That's a lot of people coming into this country. And the interesting thing about it, those individuals, the vast majority of those individuals, don't know what liberty is. They've never experienced the liberty that we enjoy in this country. They've experienced poverty and abject
depredation, all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they're coming into a nation where a government promising them some sort of utopian existence is very attractive for them. And historically, they vote Democrat ultimately when they become voters.
Right, because they get promised things, and they come into the society and they see all the wealth, but they quickly learn that, well, that wealth isn't necessarily available to me just because I'm here. You actually have to go work and get a job, and of course often they're illegal. Okay, so they're an exploitable class by definition by being illegal, and so the business community frankly is guilty in encouraging some of this behavior because they like to hire, the Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce, they're all down with all of this amnesty and so forth. legalizing these folks. And yeah, I mean, so they are a perfect population to exploit for Democrat, socialist, Marxist ideology and voting patterns. And obviously, that's clearly the case, or they wouldn't be encouraging it. They wouldn't be engineering this invasion. I mean, believe you me, do you really think the Democrats would be taking the posture they're taking if these people were sort of natural, innate Republican voters? Of course not. Of course they wouldn't.
And to that point, look what they've done to Cuba. Look what they've done to the Cuban potential refugees fleeing communism.
Well, good point. Exactly.
Secretary Mayorkas said, you will not come here, you cannot come here, and if you do come here, we're going to send you back.
That's right.
And historically, Cuban refugees ultimately are conservative voters, more conservative voters.
And this is a Hispanic community. It's not like, we're talking about white South African refugees, which I'm sure that all the governing chattering heads and talking heads in Washington would have automatic contempt for. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, an Hispanic population from an island nation 90 miles off our coast that's been subjugated by communism and knows full well what that means. And they come here and historically build businesses, they build wealth, and they're anti-communist, which means they're anti-democrat at this point.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right on that. And, another aspect of these individuals coming across the southern border is I saw a statistic today, and I think it indicated that up to 20% were COVID infected.
I've heard as high as 40 in some cases, some batches, some. Mm-hmm. The point is, you want to talk about a super spreader event, I think we've got one right there at our southern border, and I think that's by design too, frankly.
I believe it is. With that, I'm gonna throw a graphic up on the screen now that you mention that, because I think that this very clearly shows that correlation. So Lee, if you'd run that graphic for me, that first graphic.
Oh, while that graphic runs, let's review the fact that what they're doing with these illegals that are coming over, they're literally distributing them throughout these United States. They are putting them on transport planes and buses, and they're sending them places.
Absolutely.
And what does that remind you of that happened in January of 2020? It reminds me of what the Chinese did when they discovered they had a problem in China. Okay, they made illegal domestic air travel, but they continued international air travel. They seeded the world with that SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus.
Yes, they did.
And I think this graph and that red arrow there demonstrates exactly the same thing on a domestic level. I think the Biden administration, frankly, is doing this on purpose.
I agree. When I looked at this graph, and if you look at this graph, and we're going to go left to right. I don't have a pointer here that I can show you where the points are. But if you look left to right, all of the diamonds on there are mandates and protocols that were implemented in this whole COVID thing. And if you look, now I didn't do the regressions and the trend lines and all those things, but if you look at all these data points, you'll notice that none of them made a significant statistical decrease.
Right, no discrete change in the numbers that you would expect as a result of something that ostensibly has a ameliorative effect on this pandemic.
Exactly.
On transmission.
Exactly. And if you look over on the right side, you'll see the last data point. They're beginning to implement masks again as it's on the rise, and we see where they've done that previously, and it made no difference. But if you look just to the left of that, there's a big red arrow there. And this is when the Biden administration really ramped up on distributing illegal aliens around the country. Now, we're talking about, potentially 40% infection rate in these illegals. And if you look, there is a significant correlation with that event, because you see it happened right there in June. They really ramped up that measure. Mm-hmm. And you look at July, and as you go into August,
it's precipitously increasing.
It absolutely is. Lee, switch to that second graphic for me, if you don't mind. See, this is what we're talking about. They started that as cases were trending down. And all of a sudden, they're a month and a half, 2 months later, we have this huge, significant uptick. So I've got to believe that's intentional.
I do too, unless somebody has tuned in late and is saying, well, but let's see, the mask mandate ended, and then you see this, how do you know it's not that? Well, I think you demonstrated that amply well with the previous data set prior to our big run-up. I mean, all those same mask mandates did nothing to mitigate the increase in COVID.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Lee, you can come back to us if you don't mind. Yeah, the previous mandates, as John said, did nothing to alter the rate of rise in cases or create a plateau or change the trajectory. They did nothing.
And I don't know why, I don't really know why anybody would think they would. Even people who are really not familiar with the science of it ought to be pretty well able to comprehend some basic physical facts. The pore size, the openings in those masks are orders of magnitude larger than the size of these virus particles.
Yes, they are.
The best analogy, and you see this in memes throughout, the internet world, is the hurricane fencing being used to keep mosquitoes out. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about something that big, trying to keep out something that big.
Yep.
Okay, it can't happen. And you've got, if you can smell barbecue smoke with your mask on, then the virus is much smaller than those particles of barbecue smoke.
That's right. I was going to make that point because I saw somebody published the other day about if you're out in the areas where the wildfires are.
Right.
If you can smell the smoke with your mask on, well,
you're breathing virus if it's there.
That's exactly right. You are not protected.
Now, the counter, well, it can't do any harm. Well, that's not even true. I mean, frankly, for people who, have some diminished lung capacity, they're inhibiting the oxygen flow. You've got the fact that these masks, these people who are obsessive about it, moisture builds up, bacteria builds up. I mean, they've done some studies that indicate that really health outcomes for people who are wearing these masks are less positive. They have some difficulties. There can be problems. I've chosen to, just based on the simple facts and the risk factors, I don't wear the mask unless somebody's really giving me the stink eye at a store.
Right.
You just have to do it.
Now, the whole COVID thing, and people argue the mask, and that's fine. If people want to wear it, I don't care.
Right.
But to mandate them when it's obvious that they're ineffective, and I don't care how many of these so-called experts come out and talk about these things. The bottom line is, the only studies that have been done on this are skewed studies. I read one where they claimed they studied 1 million school children. All right? But there was no control group.
Right.
There was no control group that did not wear the mask. So how can you do a study? How can you conclude a study with no control group? I mean, it's simple fact. You've got to have pharmaceutical studies.
That's right.
You have a group that they give a placebo. You have a group that they give the actual meds.
Right.
They study those two outcomes. If you study only 1 million school children that wear masks, but you don't study any that don't, then
no basis for comparison.
It's useless.
There's other variables.
There are other variables.
Well, that's why I prefer to be a member of the control group when it comes to the vaccine. I haven't taken it. I've not been vaccinated, and I think one of the reasons they're so desperate to get everybody vaccinated, they don't want there to be a sizable population of people where 5 years down the road they can say, well, these people all took the vaccine, these people over here did not. Oh, and guess what? These people over here, we're all dead. I mean, I'm joking, but but that's the point. I mean,
right.
I think they want to get to where there's a small enough population of people that haven't taken the vaccine that they can sort of brush that off. And
I think probably so. Someone's probably thought that through.
I'm a proud member of the control group.
Okay. Well, the CDC published a number of COVID deaths. And I was looking through these today, and I'm certainly not a statistician.
Right.
But I can calculate averages and things like that. I mean, that's basic
median,
stuff.
right.
That's basic stuff that we learned in school.
That's correct.
I know.
They don't teach it now.
I know that's all racism now.
That's correct.
That's racist. Calculating
That's
averages
right.
is somehow racist. But anyway, I can do those things. The CDC published, and this is as of today. I looked these up today, by the way. 610,425 COVID deaths. Now, it's interesting because they give a long, like 2 pages of parameters in these numbers, how they come up with these numbers. Mm-hmm. And if you look down in the parameters, and it's a boring read,
Sure.
It's definitely not.
Wonky stuff.
It is. Well, they include both direct and indirect. So I'm not sure what the indirect.
Or the indirect, perhaps, the fatal automobile accidents where they test positive for COVID.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
George Floyd tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody saying, well, he died with COVID. That's not, nobody.
Oh, no, except in that case.
That's right.
But, they include direct and indirect. Well, is it direct causes, or are these secondary, tertiary? Really, how can you publish a number and say this is a definitive number, and you convince everyone of that? The media goes out and says this is the number of deaths.
Well, anybody that's ever participated in any of this kind of analysis, statistical or just complicated numerical analysis of any kind, knows that it's very important to outline and detail and define your assumptions and your starting point and all the factors that contribute to that final number. None of that happens here. These numbers are fundamentally meaningless because you really don't know how they calculate it. It was a lot like the global warming, kind of thing, where they come up with the climate
hockey stick.
Yeah, the hockey stick, or any number of calculations that they do that have myriad assumptions baked into the cake, which if you dig into them, you find out, well, this is just a giant fudge factor that lets you come up with whatever number you want to come up with based on very nebulous, nebulous and ill-defined numerical concepts, and that's how they kind of do this stuff in general. That's my perception.
I agree. And the interesting thing about the debunking of the hockey stick graph is that the two individuals who debunked that were just ordinary individuals.
Correct.
They weren't professional statisticians. They weren't scientists. They weren't PhD individuals. They were a couple of ordinary guys.
Right. Now, the hockey stick graph might want to review.
Everyone should remember that there used to be a graph out there showing the rise in global temperatures that all of a sudden took a steep turn at the end, mimicking the hockey stick.
Right. Looked like a hockey stick.
That's why they called it that.
Yeah.
It was used by environmentalists around the world to say, oh, we've only got 10 years left.
Right. Well, there was a CO2. There was a CO2 plot and global, the global temperature, and they used that to demonstrate that the CO2
was causing.
Right. Turned out to be total nonsense. And in fact, I think it was in the UK that they determined that they actually ruled in one of the. And UK is not exactly a bastion of, right-leaning thinking these days.
Yes, that's for sure.
Or liberty-based thinking. I'll state it that way. And one of their courts ended up saying, yeah, this graph and this information is complete nonsense. Yeah. And we're digressing a bit, but it demonstrates, they put these things out there. They never issue the corrections. The corrections end up on the fourth page, after the New York Times headline, it's on the fourth page. Oh, yeah, by the way, all that was complete nonsense that we reported 5 days ago.
Yeah, just
the hockey stick graph is that first showed up in Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth. That's where it probably gained its currency and its popularity. And it's been thoroughly debunked, and much as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, the whole DDT thing, and if you go down, I was just down on the coast recently, and if you go there, one of the islands there is Rachel Carson, where she did her research and all that. I didn't see anything in the literature about the fact that largely her work has been discredited and debunked and shown that there was no real good reason to ban DDT, and that millions of people probably contracted malaria because of this overarching, environmentalist sensibility that they're imposing on us. Well, this COVID thing is the same thing.
It is. I fully believe it is.
The numeric. Frankly, I don't believe any of the numbers. I just don't believe them, and I don't believe the risk is all that high for people who are healthy and below a certain age and don't have the comorbidities.
Yep.
So that's you got to live your life, folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. We talked about it on a previous show that they're doing all these extraordinary things, making children wear masks and all of these things, demanding vaccinations, what have you. I want to reiterate, in the category of 0 to 17-year-olds, 0 to 17-year-olds, and that's a fairly large category there, the total number of COVID deaths has been 354.
Over the total period of the pandemic.
Over the 19 months of the pandemic.
Now, let that sink in. Repeat that number. That was
354 for the 19 months. Now, Nationwide, that's correct. Nationwide. Now, if you look at the total all causes death total for 0 to 17 for the same 19-month period, it's 15,378. 354 versus 15,378.
What are the others, I wonder?
Well, that's the thing, and I didn't go through and catch all of the demographics here.
I believe, what I mean is, what are the other causes?
Oh, the other causes. Well, 859 die of pneumonia.
Okay, so, that's almost a factor of 2 to 1 on just plain old pneumonia.
Absolutely. There's 71 that die from the flu.
Okay, so 71's bringing up the rear there.
Yeah.
Okay, but this one's interesting. 12,000 due to accidents.
Yes.
Who would think that 17-year-olds and 10-year-olds would have accidents?
Yeah, absolutely not. They're the bastion of reasonability there.
But the real shocking one that really ought to get people's attention, and if people want to direct resources to things, 1,800 child abuse.
Yeah, and
death.
That's just a reported.
Right.
As child abuse. Now, there are plenty of them who die who are not necessarily reported as child abuse. I got statistics a couple of years ago from the state of Florida, from the Department of Families, and I can't remember exactly what they call their DHS there, but it's Department of Families. 400 children, they were saying, a couple of years ago died every year in Florida from abuse. So think about that. Get some perspective.
Right.
We need perspective in these things. We got to take a little break here. We'll be back, and when we come back, we're going to talk about one of our favorite politicians, Cori Bush.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for more America in Danger.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers. Everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and I can't help have anything less than extreme contempt
I was reading your mind.
for most politicians.
Well, definitely. Yeah.
And I would say that was just about all, with the exception of maybe one or two on certain issues.
Right.
But for the most part, I am very contemptuous of all elected officials because somehow they feel that the act of being elected suddenly imparts some sort of divine wisdom that they now possess above the common man.
Right. And as I've stated before, I look at them contemptuously as well, and largely because I see them as a parasitic entity. They don't really produce anything. I'm not saying in their private lives they haven't produced anything, but as politicians, they're fundamentally parasitic, and it's not a symbiosis. It's not a good type of parasitism. It's the type that just sucks the blood out of the nation and out of the people and their productive efforts. And they have the temerity to think that they can decide what is the best use of your productive output. Okay, and I just find that offensive on its face, and I think the founders found it offensive on its face, and so they constructed a system vis-a-vis the Constitution that severely limits the ability of those people to influence your life. You think they didn't have AOC mentality and Chuck Schumer's back in the 1700s? Of course they did. That's why they wrote the Constitution. That's the whole point. Okay? So, I mean, just a little reasoning here about human nature is the same as it always, and we're really only talking about a couple hundred years. Okay,
That's right.
When they wrote the Constitution and those various Bill of Rights, they were thinking, of just picture Chuck Schumer in one of those barrister wigs or something. That's who they were thinking of.
Yeah, that's an interesting picture there. But yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention wrote his wife and commenting on he could not believe that there were people that stupid in the world.
Right.
So apparently not all of the founders were on the level of Thomas Jefferson and some of the others.
Right.
Yeah.
And the various delegates and the people who, absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah, they wanted some harebrained things back
sure
then.
Did.
And fortunately, those who won out did win out.
Well, and that's the thing, and it almost sounds, like we're talking about divine intervention, and many believe that, and I can certainly be persuaded to that as well, because you're talking about a confluence of things, events. It was almost a perfect cocktail for a unique, once in history moment to create that Constitution and to form this country. And people don't understand that anymore, and they're right this close to just whizzing it away.
Oh, absolutely. We have a group right now, the railing for a Article 5 Convention of States.
Right.
And the interesting thing about it is there are no statesmen alive today that can compare with the statesmen that were alive at the founding of this nation.
Not even remotely.
And with the special interest, the manipulation of tech, the censorship, the control of media, the control of public opinion, there is no way that what we have now could ever be recreated.
It's a shame we're not a little farther advanced in our technology where we could actually take all the accumulated writings of the founders and program some robots, some simulacra, to actually sort of mimic their behavior and put them in charge for a little while. I think we would quickly get back to a more coherent republic.
I think so. And, going back to the thought that somehow elected officials think they're above the common people, Cori Bush, who is an interesting individual, to put it nice.
That's a euphemism.
Well, I can't say what I really think of her on TV, but I've got a little video clip of her, and most people have probably seen this, but if you haven't, you really need to see this. Lee, would you run that Cori Bush clip for me, please?
The thing, I won't let them get that off. You can't get that off. I'm going to make sure I have security because I know I have had attempts on my life and I have too much work to do. There are too many people that need help right now for me to allow that. So if I end up spending $200,000, if I spend $10 more on it, you know what? I get to be here to do the work. So suck it up, and defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police and put that money into social safety nets.
Come on, take the money and run.
All right, that's Cori Bush.
Well, I like the bumper music.
Now, the interesting thing about it, she's saying that she deserves special security.
Right.
While she's attempting to defund the police to take away any kind of security measures for the common people, because suddenly she's a member of the elite because she's been elected. Now, being elected does not necessarily correlate to intelligence or intellect or even the ability to empathize with people in your constituency.
Right, and all one needs to do is look at the roster of the House of Representatives, and there are many, many, many examples. There are a couple of them there that actually make her seem like a luminary, frankly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but these are the people who need to be purged from office.
They do.
We have individuals in there, and I was thinking about this today because an interesting thought came on me today. You know, Kamala Harris is kind of squirreled away somewhere. I don't know where she's been lately, but I haven't heard much from her. Nancy Pelosi is at the point of appearing to be somewhat unstable and maybe on the downhill slide. We know Joe Biden is.
Yeah.
And we know that they ushered him off for a little vacation. I won't say well-deserved, but they ushered him off for a little vacation to take him out of the spotlight for a little while.
Right.
Because I'm going to assume that the drug cocktail that they're keeping him pumped up on, they need to detox him a little bit.
Right. And you come up with a new infusion recipe.
Exactly. So because people were complaining because of everything going on right now with Afghanistan and what have you, they ushered him over to Camp David to say that he's taking a working vacation. Well, I got to thinking about that. If Joe Biden goes, they cannot put Kamala Harris in as president.
Not if they have any hopes of maintaining their hold on the presidency.
Yeah, they just can't put her in there. She's not qualified. She's abrasive. She's really just an individual that no one will.
I mean, I've said this before too. I think they feel like they made a big mistake with her. I think they feel like, well, she fooled us. I mean, she's not what they thought she was. Not politically, not ideologically, just raw competence and likability. She makes Hillary seem almost, nice by comparison.
Absolutely. So what they've got in the order of succession for the succession, you have the vice president, who's Kamala Harris. They can't put her in.
Right.
There's no way they can go with her.
Right.
Which leaves Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, that's a stretch.
All right. Well, they can't put her in because she's too old. She's too incompetent. She's too just squirrely.
And she's too repellent to too many people.
That's a good term.
Yeah.
Too repellent. Absolutely, she is too repellent. Well, the next in line would be the president pro tem of the Senate, who is Patrick Leahy, who has been in office 45 years.
He's a fossil. Yeah.
And it's just, when you think about that, the length of time Nancy Pelosi's been in, the length of time Patrick Leahy's been in, Schumer, the list goes on and on and on.
Like 2 man centuries there.
Absolutely. It's time for them to go.
It really is.
Now, I know that they manipulate the elections. That's why they have pushed into stuff. And we're in a very dangerous time, because if they continue to steal elections, which I believe they did,
right,
we will never rectify this stuff. So people have got to turn out to the polls and vote these people out.
That's right.
Absolutely do.
You're talking about the line of succession. There was some talk there for a while. It's far-fetched. I don't think it would be met with a lot of approval. But given the choices that you just provided, there's really not a lot of wiggle room. Some people have speculated that Jill Biden might somehow be wormed into the spot. There are things where somebody could resign and you could appoint somebody, because the president can appoint his vice president. Everybody remembers what happened when Nixon resigned, and then Gerald Ford appointed his vice president. Who was it? I think it was Nelson Rockefeller. Okay, well, you could have a situation like that where they just
you could.
They come up with Joe's got COVID or something. Who knows what they come up with? He resigns. He appoints. Or there's a couple scenarios where he appoints.
Well, Kamala resigns.
Right.
He appoints
his wife.
Jill.
Yeah, Jill.
He steps down, or they remove him, one of the two.
Right.
Jill goes in as president.
Because he may not be able to hold it together for another 2 years.
I don't
2.5 or 3.5. We're talking 3.5 actually. Yeah.
I really don't think he can. I would put money on it that they keep him pumped up on some sort of cocktail of boosters and what have you.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of manipulation and
absolutely. And we know that he really is incoherent in many things he says, and he really, the press asked him an off-the-wall question, and he doesn't know where he is. So it's really sad, But if we look back through history a little bit, you were talking about earlier the Nixon's infamous monetary decision.
Yeah, well, they were talking about that some this week as an anniversary, because that happened in August, I think, and was it August? What was the date there? I think it was mid-August of 1971.
August 15th.
August 15th, right?
Which is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah. And that was when he formally took the United States off the gold standard. And that had significant ramifications, and I think it's worth reviewing some of the impact of that. And really, I learned a couple things in reviewing that history. I never quite understood the rationale for that, why that served the purpose of the banksters, as people call them. But in 1933, FDR made it illegal for private citizens to own gold. Okay, well, that was sort of the first step to decoupling from gold. And let me step back a step further. For those who haven't been watching the show, we talk about this topic a lot, but the idea of a gold standard is that you have a fixed amount of something that is valuable. And gold has always historically been recognized as a thing that's valuable. It holds its value. You could buy a suit of clothes with an ounce of gold in Roman times, in the 1920s, and here in the 2020s, you can buy a suit of gold, an ounce of gold. I mean, it pretty much acts as a good exchange for value, and people always perceived it as money itself. And so coins have been minted in gold, and that was how our currency was created and regulated. So it was very difficult for politicians and financial elites to manipulate the currency when it was backed by gold. So FDR made that first step in decoupling us from gold in the 30s. Well, what Nixon did, because from the 30s through 1971, internationally, countries could still redeem their dollars in gold. So because of the Federal Reserve policies of printing money that had started in 1913, we were growing our currency quite a bit, monetizing the debt, which served the objectives of these folks domestically. But unfortunately, it was making it possible for foreign countries to redeem their dollars, which were increasingly they were getting more of because they were being printed. They were redeeming those in gold. So as I understand it, we were down to about $10 billion worth of gold in the store. We had 40 or 50, and it got whittled down to 10 because Britain and other countries were saying, hey, we want to redeem our notes in gold. So Nixon simply took us off that redeemable standard and said, we're going to go to just an all paper fiat currency. And he gave some lame, convoluted reasons why this was to protect, middle class workers. The things the politicians always say about these things, and it's so arcane and so complicated. Nobody ever knows what the hell's going on anyway. So that's what he did. And really, if you track what's happened since we got completely decoupled from the gold standard, living standards have gone down, inflation is through the roof, and many argue, and I don't know, I'm persuaded that it's certainly possible, that we're headed toward sort of the late stage hyperinflationary phase of our purely fiat currency that's resulted from these policies. And I'll tell you, with a pending $3.5 trillion so-called human infrastructure bill in the Senate, which they're going to ram through by a very sneaky and dishonest method called budget reconciliation, which the founders never envisioned being used for this kind of thing. If they ever envisioned it at all, I don't even know if it's parliamentarily legal. Okay, but they're somehow managing to do it. I mean, $3.5 trillion on top of the 1.1 they just passed, on top of the several trillions they spent during the period of COVID, okay, on top of we're at a $30 trillion deficit, our debt, rather. Okay, that is a number that's almost incomprehensible. Okay, and that's all part of this modern monetary theory where they just say, well, we can just print whatever we want and we spend with it. Yeah, they're spending your wealth with that money. Whatever you produce, they're taking money that they print essentially, okay, and they're using it for their purposes and at the top of the the food chain where that money's created before it trickles down to you, and all that's really going on is that your purchasing power is being destroyed and your wealth is being stolen from you and your labor is being stolen from you. Okay, and standards of living are dropping. But some are looking at a sort of a Weimar Republic type of progression here where we're headed towards true, genuine hyperinflation. And that's scary. That's very frightening. I mean, that's very frightening.
It is when you think, a loaf of bread might be $100,000 next week.
That's right. Or like happened in Argentina under similar circumstances where people would go into the store and the prices were updated over the period of time that it would take to go grocery shopping. So you really had no idea when you picked an item what it was going to cost because the prices changed that rapidly. Okay, and to give you an idea of how extreme this can get, Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, was a very prosperous Southern African country or British protectorate or one of those things, but basically, it was Ian Smith and Rhodesia back in the 70s, and they were the breadbasket of Africa. They were, right, well, through the kind of international pressure that the left in this country and worldwide applies, they turn that country over to the communists, basically, and it became Zimbabwe. Well, anybody who pays even superficial attention to international international politics knows what Zimbabwe is and knows what a complete basket case it is. And I wish I had the image. Well, maybe we'll pull it up and show it, because somebody showed me one. I've got a picture of one. They have a $1 trillion note. That's how much they inflated their currency and over the course of pursuing these policies. Literally a $1 trillion note, and they use a dollar. They use a dollar denomination in their currency. Okay, and what can you buy with that $1 trillion note? Basically nothing.
Right.
A pack of gum, maybe, if there's any to be purchased. Okay.
Criminal.
So that's what people are worried about. Not that we're headed exactly there.
Sure.
Okay. But I think the type of inflation we may be on the precipice of could be dramatic. And you look at what's going on in the stock market, you look at what's happening with key goods and services, those prices are going up, and even all the naysayers are saying, well, there may be a little more inflation than we thought, it may last a little longer than we thought, and blah blah, woof woof, mumble mumble, and so I don't know, but in case anybody's wondering, what motivates or animates gold bugs? Okay, why do they think the way they do? What is it about holding gold that somehow makes them think that's the fundamental rationale? It said, okay, this gold acts as a store of value. When my paper dollars become unable to buy something, my gold will become worth millions of those paper dollars, but they will hold value, and maybe I can get through to the other side of this economic disaster, because we always have these disasters, and there's a changeover. Germany did it. Now sometimes it's violent and produces war. Okay, so that's kind of maybe where things are going. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
But I have looked at history.
No one has a crystal ball,
Right.
but you know what? You can read some of the signs.
Right.
And it's not good.
And if I did have a crystal ball, I promise you it costs a lot more today than it did just a few weeks ago. Because of inflation.
That's exactly right. And the thing about the gold thing, if you buy an ounce of gold today, what's gold going for? About 1,600
Well,
an ounce?
1704 at the last check I saw, yeah.
All right, you buy that today, we have inflation, it goes up. You have the gold sitting in your safe, wherever it might be. A year from now, it's worth 2,200 an ounce. Well, you really haven't made money on that. That's the falsehood that people think.
You
haven't
preserved
made money
your
on it.
wealth.
You preserved your wealth.
Yeah, that's right.
Dollars are less in value. The gold is the same value. The dollars are what's decreased in value. So
there's a stat in that one of those articles about this gold standard, this 1971 Nixon deal. I believe that since Nixon took us off the formal international gold standard, the dollar's lost 85% of its purchasing power.
I do not doubt that.
Right.
And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about the infrastructure rape of this nation. Stay tuned.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers. Everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and we talked a little earlier about the infrastructure packages that they are trying to pass. Now, the interesting thing about it, I printed one of these articles out, and at the end of it, it had a link to the infrastructure bill. Yes, here it is. So you could actually go read it, but I suggest you allot some time for it, because this infrastructure bill is 2,702 pages.
Yeah, and you know all the representatives have read it thoroughly. None of them have read it.
Not a senator in there who's read this.
And they admit it. They tell you, we can't.
They drop it on their desk and call for a vote a day later.
Yeah.
You know, it's 2,700 pages. They don't even know what's in it.
That's longer than the Bible.
It is
10 times as long as the Bible.
They don't even know what's in it. You know, if I were in Congress or the Senate, and someone brought me a bill and threw it on my desk and said, yeah, here's 2,000 pages. We're going to take a vote on this tomorrow, so be prepared to vote. You know what my vote would be? My default vote would be no.
Nope.
Absolutely not. If I don't have time to read through it, you know, I really believe that there should be a constitutional amendment that says that any bill before Congress, in the House or the Senate, cannot be more than 5 pages long. Limited to 5 pages. If they can't get it done in 5 pages, you know what? It doesn't need to be done.
Well, that's right.
Government does too much. And the great thing about this, it's bipartisan.
Well,
so that means that we're getting the shaft from both sides.
I am very disappointed that 19 Republican senators chose to vote, you know, and North Carolina's 2 ostensible Republican senators did so as well. They voted for that.
Absolutely did. And Tom Tillis posted on Facebook, and I saw his crowing about supporting that.
Right.
I couldn't help but post, and you know, I'm surprised I'm not in Facebook jail, which I may be. I haven't been back on since I posted, but it's absolutely outrageous. Well, that an individual would be proud of voting.
Well, that's right. And you hear these business roundtable and Chamber of Commerce, you know, commercials crowing about how we need that and call your senators.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of businesses in the short term will get rich off. This is exactly what we're talking about. They're going to print this money. They're going to spend it. They're going to divert it to people who are in the connected class and are the chosen ones to get these big contracts and do these various things. Can't afford it in reality. Okay, the money's being printed to do it, and of course the big you know elephant in the room is that the majority of not so much for the 1.1 trillion that was just voted on, but for this $3.5 trillion infrastructure or human infrastructure, it's just communism. It's just it's Green New Deal policies. It's and in fact, you know, I don't want the time to get away before I have a chance to make this point.
There are new taxes on it.
Right.
Penalties and fees on retirement accounts. It's the rape of America.
Right. Well, I'm going to find what it is that.
While you look for that, I want to make this point. You know, looking at this infrastructure deal, certainly huge corporations will get these big packages, big construction projects and projects such as that. If you remember the Trans-Texas corridor that was built years ago, there were millions and millions of dollars spent on that. I can't remember what the total price tag was on that. Guess who got that? A Spanish firm. A foreign firm came to the U.S. and underbid everyone else and took that.
Yeah.
So, can we expect anything less with all of these infrastructure deals? How many Chinese companies are going to come in here and take this? This is nothing but money laundering to fund foreign entities like China and some of these other countries who will come in here with virtual slave labor and change orders and what have you. You know, this is absolutely outrageous. You know, I'm really more and more becoming in favor of pelting these elected officials with rotten fruit when they come to town.
Well, I'm prepared, you know, to start investing in tar and feathers futures. I mean, I think it's really time that you know, that old time-tested technique be brought to bear.
Oh, I agree. Now,
I found what I was looking for.
Okay.
So we're talking about Green New Deal stuff here, and of course that's being sold as a really this fundamental transformation of our energy infrastructure. It's supposed to be clean, renewable, and we get away from all these nasty carbon producing, which I'm amazed at what a good job they've done of conflating carbon dioxide with pollution. Carbon dioxide is not sulfur dioxide. It's not, poison. We exhale carbon dioxide. Plants take it in. High levels of CO2 produces a greener world. It is not, and it's not even that good a greenhouse gas. That aside, this is very interesting. Now, everybody knows about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, erstwhile known as AOC. People may not be familiar with one of her prime handlers, a fellow by the name of Saikat Chakrabarty. Okay, and he came under some fire some time ago because he was wearing a shirt with an image of somebody who was basically a Nazi, a supporter of Hitler, and a sort of a philosopher, but a supporter of Hitler, and he got called on the carpet for that. But this is what he said. The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all, because we really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing. So the Green New Deal is the old Red Deal. Okay, it's just communism. And Saikat Chakrabarty is a communist, and so is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And unfortunately, she and the other so-called members of the squad seem to be dictating policy for the Democrats. And which isn't very difficult to do because they've always been closet communists as far as I can tell anyway, the vast majority of them at the elected level. I'm not talking about, nominal people who vote for Democrats, and of course in the South especially, that's included a lot of people who do so out of loyalty and for historical reasons. They need to adjust their thinking.
Absolutely
they really do. I mean, the Democrats are not your friend, and frankly, they're not friends to people who believe in the Constitution.
No, they are not.
And frankly, many Republicans aren't either. Okay, so there need to be some alternatives, and there needs to be possibly some realignment of the Republican Party, which was underway. I mean, that was kind of going, and I think it still is. I think that was really what was happening under Donald Trump. The impulse, the reason he ended up becoming elected was that impulse.
Absolutely was.
Okay. But that, this infrastructure stuff, these two bills, if they ram this stuff through, this is fundamentally transformative, which is a paraphrase of their words. What did Barack Obama say when he ran? He wanted to fundamentally transform this country. Well, these mechanisms are subtle, not obvious to everybody, mechanisms for doing exactly that. And please, I encourage, we take calls, so
absolutely,
we'd love to hear some commentary on what we're saying here, or maybe some pushback or anything, because how this can be viewed as anything other than they love to misappropriate the word violence. Well, this seems like violence against our finances and violence against our Constitution for them to do this. This is what they're getting ready to do here.
It is. Talk about an insurrection.
Absolutely.
This is a quiet insurrection.
That's right.
They're pushing through, and I'm going to tell you something. Passing a bill like this infrastructure bill by a single vote is not what democracy is about.
By a single vote, 51 to 49 kind of single vote.
Exactly.
Right.
A single vote. That is not what this republic is about. We're not a democracy, but that's not what this republic is about. Now, we have democratic votes where the majority rules.
We have mechanisms,
wins.
right.
We have those, but we are not a democracy, and a single vote implementing this is an affront to every American out there.
Well, we have a Constitution that proscribes, that prohibits certain things, and this is almost certainly one of them. There is no way that spending $3.5 trillion, okay, with a $30 trillion debt on the books already, doing it through a process called budget reconciliation, which, that is an extremely arcane and complicated form of trickery. Okay,
that's exactly what it is.
It's a way to avoid the filibuster. It's a way to avoid having to get to the 60-vote threshold in the Senate, okay, to pass something, which is traditionally how this works. All right, and the reason for that 60-vote threshold is the idea is that we don't want to just do things based on majoritarian whim. It's got to be a solid reason to do what we're getting ready to do. And they're going to use this budget reconciliation nonsense so they can get around the fact that they really only have 50 votes, okay, maybe 51 with tie-breaking Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I agree. If it were up to me, every vote in every government body, all the way down to school boards and local committees and homeowner associations, would require a supermajority to be passed.
Well, frankly, if you want to solve these problems, and we talk about this, and this is controversial because people don't understand it, but really, as you pointed out, it's not that the system is flawed, it's that the electorate is flawed, frankly. And the reason the electorate is flawed is not because they're fundamentally different than they were in the past, but when you allow people to vote who don't have any skin in the game, when you allow non-taxpayers to vote, when you allow people who haven't been in this country more than 10 minutes, okay, to vote, and when you tell people they have some kind of inalienable right to vote no matter what their status or what their contribution to the economy or what their tax, that's a conflict of interest. Essentially, you end up having people voting for politicians who are promising to take things from you and give them to them, okay?
Yep.
And that's not how the system was designed. The system was designed for everybody's constitutional rights to be sacrosanct, inviolable, okay? And for politicians to be elected by those members of society who actually were participating in the economy.
Absolutely.
It's that, and I know that's probably something that's giving liberals out there the vapors and even some
yes.
conservatives, but that was the system. And frankly, I would much rather have my constitutional, I would give up my right to vote today if I knew that the letter of the Constitution would be followed with respect to my property rights, my firearms rights, and all the other rights that people don't seem to even understand the importance of these days.
As would I. And we can thank a broken electorate and 545 individuals in Washington.
That's right.
That's both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House.
That's right.
The executive branch and the Supreme Court. And with that, unfortunately, we have to sign off.
Okay.
I've enjoyed the show tonight.
Well, I have too, as always.
And hopefully someone will give us a call next week and either tell us we're full of hot air or give us some sound reasoning.
Yeah.
Sound reasoning would
Or
be
you're
good.
free to call and agree with us and give us strokes. So
That's
all good
right.
too.
We're always good
We have
at
egos.
All right, I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
See you next week.